Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to another edition of Coffee Table Talks. That's good. This morning, I'd like to talk to you about what happened on Thursday of Passion Week. So Monday, we talked about the contention that went on. Tuesday, we talked about Jesus teaching and ended up teaching on the Mount of Olives. On Wednesday, we talked about the betrayal. So Thursday, so now we're just hours away from Jesus being arrested. He was arrested in the garden. So Thursday, what happened was Jesus was spending time with his disciples, teaching them some very last important things. Jesus was explaining things about his kingdom, things about him leaving and what they needed to know. He was in the upper room with them, having an intimate meal with them, and introduced what we now celebrate or commemorate communion. So he passed the bread around, he passed the wine around, he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." It's a very emotional, very intimate, very close time. And as that's going on, the betrayer is there. So we talked about yesterday and last night at church, the betrayer Judas, inspired and actually possessed by Satan, conspiring with the chief priests and the scribes. So they're plotting how to get Jesus, how to arrest him. And as Jesus then is getting ready, just hours away from him being arrested and then going through the 6 trials and declaring him innocent in every single one, yet being flogged and then put on a cross. So today I want to talk to you about how Jesus prepared for that. So we're going to talk today about Preparation Thursday. How did Jesus prepare for what he was about to go through? And it was prayer. So we'll call it Preparation Thursday, and preparation is prayer. So we pick up the scene in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is an amazing place, the Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane actually means oil press. Jesus prayed in the garden 3 times, recorded for us in all the Gospels. We're going to look at Matthew. But Gethsemane means oil press. In order for an olive seeds to be pressed, they had first crushed them, put them in a basket, and then they had put these 1.5-ton stones on them and press them down and squeeze them to get all the oil they can out of it. That oil would drip down into a basin. So it's interesting, Jesus prayed 3 times, and then in the Garden of Gethsemane, it's called the oil press, and olive seeds were crushed 3 times. So this was a pressing, this was a crushing, this was agony when Jesus was praying. So prayer can be like that. Prayer is pressing in. Prayer is how we go to God in times of desperation. Prayer is how we prepare to meet things that we're not even sure what we're facing. And so I want to look at that, the preparation, how we prepare for life, how we prepare for the day, the importance of prayer. And Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, he had his disciples there with him, and he called James, John, and Peter specifically away from the other disciples. And he said, "Come, stay here and you pray, and then I'm going to go over here and pray." So as Jesus was praying, he said this is interesting. He said in Matthew 26:39, as he's praying, he said, "Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." So as he's praying, we see the significance of the agony, the pressing of what he was about to go through. And we see him praying, but notice he wasn't praying for the situation to necessarily stop. He was praying ultimately for God's will. We also see from this that if there was another way for us to be redeemed, Jesus was praying to the Father, if there's another way, Lord, let this cup pass from me. If there's any other way, I believe that's more for us than it was for Jesus. And that's to show us that there's no other way to God. There's no other way to be redeemed. There's no other way to the Father. If there was, then God would have said, okay, there's another way. But there wasn't another way. It had to be Jesus. And so as Jesus is praying, not my will, but your will be done. That's our prayer. That's how we need to come to God in prayer. We say, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. And we know that as we're praying, God is strengthening us for his will, whatever it is his will is. But as he prays the second time, Peter's falling asleep while he's praying. He keeps reminding Peter, you need to pray. It's important for you to pray. Now, another thing is Peter's lack of praying set him up to fall not long after this, when he was asked if he was a follower of Jesus 3 times and he denied Jesus 3 times. Jesus knew, Peter, you need to be praying because you don't know, just in a few minutes you're going to be faced with this temptation. And the way to face that temptation is you need to be praying. You need to be pressing in. Peter wasn't prepared for that because he wasn't praying. So it says a second time, he's praying, "Oh, my Father, if this cup cannot pass from me unless I drink it, your will be done." So the second time he's praying, now he's praying more in a way where I'm not going to pray this cup pass from me. I'm praying if it can't. I know it can't. And so I want to sort of, through these prayers, direct myself forward into the direction that you're taking me. Your will through my prayer is starting to take root in my heart. And as I'm praying, as I'm pressing, I'm being prepared inwardly. And then he prays another time. But I want you to see this one thing. We're going to finish with this. He tells Peter this: watch and pray lest you enter temptation. So this is the answer to facing temptation, to facing testing. It's to be pressing in prayer. And he says this: the spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. So that's why we pray. We pray because our flesh is weak. The spirit is willing. The spirit can handle the testing, the temptation, but it's our flesh that's weak. And so when we pray, then we become strong in spirit and weak in flesh, which is what we want. We want our spirit to dominate. So that's a big teaching on what prayer actually is. Prayer is preparation. Prayer is pressing in. Prayer is strengthening ourselves in the spirit to meet whatever faces us for that day, or for whatever God has placed in our way, on our agenda. And so here's the thing. We're going to finish with this. Our prayer life is so important. And when we see Jesus praying, this is a model of how we press in. And Jesus prayed so hard, so intently. And this was the way he handled things in life. He pressed in prayer. It strengthened him in his spirit to be able to do what God had called him to do, to accomplish God's will. And that's what God has for us today. On Preparation Thursday, God has for us to press in, to pray, and to understand prayer is the greatest weapon we have to face the enemy, to face our temptations, to face the things. So let's take this Thursday and let's develop our prayer life. Let's dedicate this day to prayer, and let's press in, and let's take time to get alone with God and get on our knees and cry out to him, press in prayer. God bless you. I love you guys, and we'll see you soon.